Heather, and I'm the Manager of Educational Partnerships and Volunteers here at the Fraser. We've been talking a lot about important figures in the civil rights movement lately, and that is why I am here in the Fraser's What is a Vote Worth exhibit. I wanted to talk to you today about a monument to civil rights heroes that you may have walked right past and never even noticed.
Charles H. Parrish, Jr.Freedom Park is in one of the busiest places at the University of Louisville, situated at its northwestern edge between the dorms and dining halls and the classroom buildings. Despite the amount of foot traffic it gets, the park is an often overlooked part of the campus. The park was built in 2012, but its history goes back much farther than that. On June 29, 1895, a monument to Confederate soldiers was erected here at 3rd and what was then Ship Streets. The statue was removed a few years ago and is now in Brandenburg. An influential historian, J. Blaine Hudson, wanted to create a more full conversation in the space shared with this monument. He was the dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at U of L until 2012, and he brainstormed a park that served as a living museum that demonstrated, according to the park's website, Louisville's progression from a city of slaveholders and black settlements in the 1750s to its current status as a diverse metropolitan area still struggling to enact equal rights for all its residents. A little bit about Blaine Hudson. He was a beloved figure at the university and around the state who was devoted to equal rights at the school from the time he was a student there in the 1960s, a mere decade after it had integrated. Hudson's work bringing the Underground Railroad's history in Kentucky to light has been really important to the Fraser and our sharing of this story. This panel, about his life and work, is a centerpiece in the park. There is a lot to be learned at this park. A series of obelisks tell of Louisville's long and difficult history from its settlement in the 1750s, which included an economy dependent on slavery, to today. The stories included also tell of the free black community in Louisville and its leaders' contributions to the struggle for freedom. The eye-catching centerpiece of Freedom Park is the Playhouse. This building is one of the older ones on U of L's campus, having been constructed in 1874 for the House of Refuge for Orphan Children. In the 1920s, it was repurposed as a theater, and after a brief period of dismantling and being in storage, it was dedicated as the Playhouse in 1980. The dedication was presided over by Woodford Porter, the first African-American board chair at the University of Louisville. Another recognizable feature of this park is the Civil Rights Leaders display at Cardinal Boulevard. This area gets a lot of foot traffic, but many who pass by may not recognize the important figures that are featured on these beautiful glass panels. They're all figures in the fight for equal rights at and through U of L and in education. You can read about these extraordinary people at Freedom Park, but let me give you a short tour. Braden is a civil rights leader from Louisville who taught at U of L and worked as a journalist here. In 1954, she purchased a house in a segregated neighborhood for the Wade family. The family faced terrible threats after moving in the neighborhood. Anne and her husband Carl went to trial for this ultimately, and Carl served 8 months in jail. Anne is now the figurehead of the Anne Braden Institute at U of L, which continues her legacy. Dr. Rufus Clement served as the first dean of Louisville Municipal College, now known as Simmons College. He served from 1931 to 1937 before moving on to Atlanta University in Georgia. Lyman T. Johnson was an educator at Central High School who participated in a legal test case intended to desegregate the University of Kentucky. His next campaign, to desegregate U of L, led to the desegregation of all Kentucky schools. Johnson Middle School in Louisville is named after him, and multiple scholarships exist in his honor. Dr. Lucy Freibert was a pioneer in women's studies and women's rights. A sister of Charity of Nazareth, she taught the first women's studies course at U of L and one of the first African American literature courses. She advocated for a sexual harassment policy at U of L when such policies were a new thing, and after her retirement, she helped found the Family Scholar House. Dr. Charles Henry Parrish, Jr. is the person who this park is named after. He was the first African American professor at U of L. He was active in civil rights work at a pivotal time in American history after his position made him the first African American tenured professor in a predominantly white Southern university. His research helped lead to desegregation in Jefferson County public schools. Dr. Eleanor Young Love was the first African American librarian at the University of Kentucky and the first African American dean at the University of Louisville. She was the first director of Project Upward Bound, a college preparation program, and the Lincoln Institute, which had a similar educational mission. Known as a skilled negotiator, she brought her diplomacy to the case of equal rights at the university. Wilson Wyatt, a former mayor of Louisville, was lieutenant governor of Kentucky from 1959 to 1963. In 1949, he made the first motion to desegregate the University of Louisville. Dr. Joseph H. McMillan, Sr. founded the National Conference on the Black Family in America. Known fondly as Dr. Mac to his students, he got his start in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where he became the first African American principal in the school system. In 1976, he became assistant provost at U of L, leading minority affairs. He was also president of the Urban League here in Louisville. Dr. Woodford Porter, who I mentioned as present at the dedication of the Playhouse in the center of Freedom Park, was the first African American board chair at the University of Louisville. He was the first African American person on the Board of Education here in Louisville. His family still owns the A.D. Porter & Sons Funeral Home in town, which has been family-owned for 4 generations. They oversaw the burial of Muhammad Ali in 2016. This is just a small overview of the outdoor museum about the University of Louisville's civil rights heroes that you may have driven right past and overlooked. I highly recommend you check out Freedom Park and see all there is to discover.